Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Rob Cupello, and today I have Dr. Mark Provencher from Kelowna Dental Solutions join me. Mark, thanks for joining me.
Well, thanks for having me.
I was actually thinking, I was writing some notes, and I have to ask you this. We're going to start with this. So do people call you Dr. Mark? Because when I run into my high school teachers, I still call them like Mr. I don't call them by their first name. Do you get that as well? So
I get that all the time.
Yeah.
And it really started out of the early practices because the kids couldn't say my last name. So,
so you're just Dr. Mark?
Yeah. Well, actually, for a lot of my patients now, I'm just Mark. So.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. I always wonder if people call because it's like a respect thing for me that I always call like my doctor is doctor and my teacher's Mr. And
dentistry is a little bit different, I think, than medicine, and I think it's not quite as formal.
Yeah,
there's a lot more relationship involved. So
interesting.
Yeah.
So we had a topic today, and I changed it on you. So we're gonna be talking today about internet's most asked questions about dental.
Oh, great.
And other stuff.
And other stuff.
Yeah, we're going to make you the expert in more than just dentistry, because we know that you are the expert in dentistry, but we're going to ask some other things. But before we do, I'm actually curious because full disclosure, I'm a patient as well, and I've worked with Dr. Mark for a while, and I feel like you take a little bit of different approach to dentistry than other dentists, and that's just my personal opinion. And so I'm curious of, where did you who or what influenced you when it comes to like the way that you approach dentistry? Because I would assume everyone's different, right? If you go somewhat, but I'm curious, like, what influenced you or who influenced you when it came to this? Yeah,
it's a great question, actually. Because it's radically different than how I was taught in dental school. Everything was very, clinical, very, step by step. But at the end of the day, I had the opportunity early on to work in a couple of different practices in other cities with people that were forward thinkers. And they really recognized and resonated with the fact that you're treating people, right? Yeah. And they kept that first and foremost in the mind. Sometimes you can get lost in the minutia if you're just looking at the small little problem that you're trying to fix, and you forget the fact that there's a living, breathing person who's awake the entire time.
Yeah.
Who's feeling, somewhat a leverage difference in terms of the power dynamics in that situation. So yeah, I just ultimately try to treat people as though they're family, really. And ultimately how I would end up treating myself, I guess.
But I think you come more of a holistic, and I don't mean holistic approach in the sense of like, hey, if you're coming in for braces, well, something's causing your teeth to go crooked. It's not, putting braces on is going to straighten, but you haven't fixed the underlying problem. And I think that's unique. I feel like it's unique, but maybe not. But
yeah, well, I mean, you've probably had a few different dentists.
Yeah.
But I've only been one.
Yeah,
so.
True.
so that's a harder thing to think about. But the reality is that's fostered out of, if you're just correcting whatever has developed, okay, so let's take crooked teeth, like you said. Yeah. So you straighten the teeth. Well, how come they were crooked to begin with?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. It's not just a genetic crapshoot in terms of people either have straight teeth or they don't have straight teeth.
Right.
There are things that have to happen in order for it to work out correctly, and if that's not happening, then I think you have to step back and try to figure out why. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
what the why is, right?
If
you can get to that and you can treat that, not only do you end up being able to address whatever the concern was, but you get stability, you get longevity. And I think, that, I guess, is a more holistic approach.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I always find it interesting anyway. So I'm curious if there was someone, like if someone influenced you in your previous practice, or how you come about to taking that approach, right? So
no, but I think, if you have enough life experience, you read enough books, you listen to enough podcasts, it's not like, dentistry is dealing with obviously oral health and that side of the equation, but I mean, we're ultimately all dealing with problems and problem solving, no matter what the industry is.
Fair enough.
And if you just think about it on that perspective, you can steal stuff from every other industry, and I love the why.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I did say we're going to ask you some questions that are not just, because I want to see how much of an expert you are outside of dentistry as well.
Okay.
So I Googled, and I put in Google, what are the most most asked questions, relevant questions today.
Okay.
And we were talking about one when we were out there, which is hilarious, is, will Donald Trump's conviction help or hurt his election outlook? And I'm like, that's hilarious. I want to hear what a dentist thinks of if that's going to affect or hurt or help him in the election.
Yeah. Well, I mean, honestly, if I thought about it objectively, I don't think it'll make
any
difference one way or the other. I think the people that love Donald Trump, love Donald Trump. I think the people that don't. And I think in this day and age, politics is so divided anyways that you're either in that camp or you're not.
Or you're not.
Or you're not in that camp.
That's funny.
And so if I'm thinking of it on that terms, it's a heck of a lot of publicity. So I think it probably will help.
Probably did. He had his, I think he had a big fundraising day yesterday from that. Okay, here's another one. Ready? Who's going to win the Stanley Cup?
I'm going Oilers.
Love it. That was the right answer. And last one, Kendrick Lamar or Drake.
Orange can.
Yeah, Kendrick Lamar or Drake.
Oh God.
Do you know the battle they're doing? The beef that they got going on?
My daughter has made me aware. I even know there's a third party in there, although I can't remember. And I think that's its own sidebar joke. But I'll probably catch a lot of flack for this. It's not really my jam.
Oh, come on. We're gonna get you too. We're gonna get you up there.
I think based on the fact that he's Canadian, I would probably go pro Drake, but I don't actually know any of the specifics. So apologies.
We're gonna make you rap now too.
Yeah,
you didn't
exactly.
know that, so.
Exactly.
It was actually funny when I was looking at these questions. You know, one of the top searched questions is, "What time is it?"
Really?
I swear. And I'm like, wait a minute. Can you not look on your computer?
What time is it somewhere?
What time is it?
Oh my gosh.
It's one of the most searched questions. But anyways, and then one of them is, how do I tie a tie? Was number 4.
Well, I get that one. Both my kids have spent some time in private school, and neither of them can tie a tie. So there you go.
But let's talk dental, because I do want to. So I do have a list of questions that are their most asked questions, and I thought I'd love to just get your thought on what you think of this. So one of the top ones is, I find it funny, is how do I prevent cavities? Is one of the top questions. And I'm like, that's kind of funny.
You can start with brushing and flossing for sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, honestly, I think it's a relevant question. So I have patients who I swear come in and maybe they don't even put the right end of the toothbrush in their mouth and they don't get cavities. Yeah. So there is some genetic component to it, but it's much more than that. So obviously it starts with healthy nutrition. If you can stay away from sugars, and sugars are pretty much everywhere. So you got to really be careful with that. You got to understand that the sugar is going to work for the next 90 minutes, right? So if you can see your way clear to do anything to cleanse the teeth, you know, if you can take a brush to work or to school, that's great. Certainly electric toothbrushes are better than manual toothbrushes. Water flossers are a wonderful addition. So anything that you want to do to elevate your game is going to end up helping you, especially if you find yourself in that category where you have some sort of predisposition, right?
What about chewing gum? I've heard some people have said, like, if you chew gum, does that help, hurt? Like,
Well, first of all, you got to go sugar-free, obviously, right? Because some gums still actually have sugar. Right. There are gums out there that actually have products like xylitol in them. So xylitol it's a natural product, and it's interesting. To the quote unquote sugar bugs or the bacteria that create cavities, they are looking at that like sugar, and so they'll ingest that. Right. They don't know how to metabolize it, and essentially kills those off. So if you choose the right gum, I think that's definitely helpful.
Interesting. That was my question. That wasn't one of the Google ones. So.
Other things like cheese and nuts are also helpful, because there are things that basically combat cavity decay. So
lots of cheese and nuts. I love it.
There you go. Charcuterie.
Why do regular dental visits matter? That was the next most asked questions, and it's one of the topics we wanted to talk about today. Actually, coming in for your regular checkups and cleanings and
being regular. First of all, I think it supports habits, right? So things are important. Oftentimes, for me, anyways, if I go somewhere, say a mechanic is telling me something, or I'm getting some piece of information, it's going to be very relevant and important for me at the time. If I never go back, it's easy for me to forget that or put that on the back burner. Second element is people mistakenly associate pain or discomfort with problem, and those two words are not synonyms, right? So while you might think, hey, everything feels okay, right? First of all, it's a study of one. You only have yourself to reference, so you don't maybe even know what good feels like, right? So that's a challenge. But if we can see things and head them off at the pass, I often make the ridiculous analogy, and I tell people, you have a choice. You can either build a fence at the top of the cliff, or you can park an ambulance at the bottom, right? So it's your choice, and really it comes down to how proactive or reactive you want to be. Right.
Interesting.
So the earlier things are caught, the simpler the solutions are, the less expensive the solutions are.
Right.
right?
So it's like doing regular maintenance on a vehicle, or you go in every 5 years.
Yeah, you wouldn't make mountain passes in your car and never change the oil, or rotate the tires, or tighten the fan belt, or any of that kind of stuff, because you know something bad's going to happen.
Right.
You just don't know when or what.
Yeah, right. Interesting. This was actually a topic that I think we talked about in the office a couple of days ago, and it was interesting. It was one of the most searched ones is, do teeth need fluoride?
This is a hot button topic.
Is it okay? He's like, next question.
This is almost up there with Trump. Okay. Yeah. There are lots of different thoughts and feelings on fluoride, but there's no question that fluoride, just as an element itself, will help defend against cavities. Now, see my earlier comment about whether or not you're high risk or low risk, right? So if you've never had a cavity in your life, you've been regular, you're a good brusher and flosser, you pay attention to your diet and that sort of thing, yeah, you can make a real great argument that maybe fluoride's not that critical for you. Now, if you're on the other end of the spectrum, you have a choice. You may or may not want to have the fluoride, but you will trade off the cost of constantly having to have repairs and having things renewed and spiral basically.
So it's, if I hear right, it's like, it's really individual, is it?
100%. Everything should be individual, right? So people always say, well, how often should I go to the dentist? And it's like, I don't know. I need to see what kind of shape you're in, and what sort of student you are. If you're really great at taking care of yourself and managing things, then you get, terrible term, but you get a longer leash, right? Right. Interesting. If you're not, then we'll recommend shorter. Yeah. Choice is still yours. As a patient. I mean, nobody can tell you what to do. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. So on that sort of home maintenance stuff, one of the questions is mouthwash safe to use, and should we use it? But again, not every mouthwash is created equal, right? So you got to be careful. It's no different than reading the labels, in the grocery store. So some of them are alcohol based, which aren't great. They tend to desiccate or dry out the mouth, which tends to make you want or need or be inspired to use more mouthwash. Interesting. There are more natural products that are out there. Some of them actually will have, sinister little chemotoxic ingredients that sneak into them, but they're at levels where it's quote unquote safe, right? That happens in toothpaste. It happens pretty much throughout the industry, right? Interesting. That was one of the questions actually, is that which toothpaste is the best to use? Is it the same, like individual, really dependent? It's 100% individual. Some people will actually have tissues that will respond negatively to certain toothpaste. So oftentimes you get, well, I shouldn't say oftentimes, but sometimes you get somebody who will come in and they'll say, oh my gosh, I've got, sores and almost like a rash inside their mouth. And one of the things we'll ask them is like, hey, have you changed anything recently? First of all, diet intake, etc. But then secondly, any of the products that you're using. And more often than not, we'll find that it's a change in one of the products that they're using. Interesting, like a mouthwash or toothpaste or something. Exactly. So, but my visceral response is the toothpaste you use is better than the one you don't. So. I love that one. That's a great quote. I like that. Same thing with the toothbrush. Right? That's interesting. The one you use is better than the one you don't. Funny. One of the questions is, why would I have sensitive teeth? What would cause sensitivity? I'm sure there's like lots of different reasons. Yeah, there's a ton. So there are specific or localized issues. So the two most, well, let's break it down. In order to have sensitivity in the tooth, you've got to be accessing some sort of nerve ending somewhere. Okay. So if we think about how a tooth is built, you've got enamel over top of the tooth. That's like a fingernail. It's got no nerve endings. If that's the only thing that's in the mouth and it's intact, you're not likely to have sensitivity there unless the teeth themselves are being overpressured. So you think about my clenchers and my grinders, people that are sitting there thinking about things all the time and they're hammering. I actually tell my patients, teeth touching is like, it's self-harm. It's the equivalent of cutting yourself, right? Teeth are not supposed to touch during the day. So putting it in those terms gets people to at least make peace with the fact that they should be resting. Because if you're over leveraging the teeth, if we think all the way back to, let's say, caveman days, it's a single electrical junction from your tooth to your brain. Because before processed foods and McDonald's and all that kind of stuff, if you lost your teeth, you died. Right? So that feedback loop is exquisite. So that would be the first thing. Either you've got exposed root, you've overpressurized the teeth.
Yeah.
Could be a crack or a cavity, right? Those are the most common things. And then depending on how the pain manifests and what its profile is like will help you determine which is which.
Interesting. Back to home care. How often do I need to floss? How often should I? How often should someone be flossing?
Ideally daily.
Okay.
I've heard it said before that there are more people that work in dentistry than there are daily flossers in the world. So, but you said how often should.
Yeah, should.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, if you're the type of person who's got, let's say less than ideal alignment of your teeth and you've got more propensity to build up, trapping of food, et cetera, or you have advanced gum issues, et cetera,
you want to do
then you get bumped up. So again, it's highly individual.
Yeah.
But the average regular person, if we just take that at face value, I would say daily.
And what about, this is my question, what about the different types of floss? Because now there's like those picks and there's those there's different, it used to be just a string for lack of a better word.
Yep.
But now you can buy a whole bunch of different things. Does it matter what you use?
Again, the floss you use is better than the one you don't.
Okay.
Okay. So some people won't use the string because they find it too cumbersome and they can't dial in the technique. So if you're not willing to do that, then the picks become a viable solution. But even the pick itself, you have to think about it. The tooth is basically round, right? So when the floss goes between there, there's a point of contact or connection. And of course, you want to cleanse that, but there's stuff trapped all the way down the root. So think of it like a contact lens sitting around there. So unless your floss takes the shape of that, you're not going to actually clean.
So your pick won't really get in there.
It can, but you've got to be committed to pushing it against the tooth ahead and pulling it back.
Right. And most people won't do that.
It's always technique sensitive. So my advice would be chat with your hygienist and say, hey, listen, this is what I'm using. Help me use it to its, greatest efficacy.
Yeah.
Right.
Interesting.
Because everything will work. You just have to be committed to making it work. Yeah.
I think you already talked about this, but one of the questions is, should I be using an electric toothbrush?
In my opinion, yes.
And what's the difference? Why? Because we never had electric toothbrushes 20 years ago, and people were like, what I mean? So why should you use one over a regular toothbrush?
Yeah, well, I mean, at one point in time, we didn't have cars, we didn't have horses, right? So, I mean,
we still do.
Yeah, but I
took my horse to work today.
Okay, well, present company excluded. When technology advances, there's no reason not to embrace it. That's the first part of it.
Okay.
Second part of it is, quite frankly, the engineering of the mechanics of that brush is so much superior to what you can do. It's not that you can't do a great job with a manual brush.
Right.
It's about making it easier, more predictable, more repeatable, right? Okay. So several things that come in with electric toothbrush, usually they've got a timer, so that inspires people to actually brush. If you look at how long a person would brush and there's no timer that they're trying to satiate, I bet you it's less than 30 seconds.
Yeah, right.
In
their mind is 2 minutes.
We could probably Google it, but I would surmise it's definitely well under a minute.
Interesting.
That's an issue. Second thing is, and this is what I use to sell my kiddos on this. If you, not my kids, but kids in general, that brush is going at, upwards of 31,000 brush strokes a minute. So if you want to match the equivalent, right?
Interesting.
You're going to have to brush for a long time. Third thing is there's pressure sensors in there. So the way electric toothbrush should be used is it's a sit, let it work, move it. You're not actually scrubbing. The scrubbing can damage structures. Okay.
Interesting.
And that's a whole different topic. And maybe one day we'll get into hey, what's recession? What causes it? All that kind of stuff, right? Because it's not brushing.
Interesting. Now, it's funny because I have to use the toothbrush because I'm a hard brusher.
Right.
I was someone that's I was, for some reason I was mad at my teeth. I don't know. I went hard. So an electric toothbrush helped that side of it. Yeah.
It totally curbs that habit, especially if you're using it correctly. It eliminates one of the possible self-harms. So
here's one thing that Dr. Mark's always trying to get me to use, and I haven't yet. So, and I say I didn't, is a water pick.
Water pick.
Yeah. See, he knew. What about water picks then? Speak of the, why, and I think I know, because you just talked about the tooth and getting into places you can't get, right? So.
Well, let's go back to the original analogy. So if you take two cups and you put them together, okay, so you've got that contact point, but that contact point is very brief, and then it opens up into a triangle, most of which you can't see. If you ask your dentist to show you your x-rays, you can see how big the space is, which is it bottomed out by the bone down there, basically.
Right.
So if you've got a little recession and bone loss, your triangles become bigger. So now you're thinking about this little tiny piece of thread that's supposed to go in between there and clean everything out of the triangle. I'm not so sure it's going to be a great job. So the way that I would advocate it, and you don't have to, in case you're going to ask me, you don't have to water pick every single time you brush. But what I would end up suggesting is you floss, which breaks loose the big chunks. Then you bring the fire hose, which is our little water pick, and then you bring the street sweeper, which is your electric toothbrush.
Interesting.
Yeah. And that, at the end of the day, I think is the best oral self-care routine you can do.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Last question on here is, how do dentists typically whiten teeth? I thought that was an interesting question. I would say, is it different for everyone too, though? Or do you kind of use the same technique for everybody?
Realistically, I suppose there's 3 different ways.
Okay.
So 2 of them are dealing with your natural dentition. So you can take a tooth and basically apply a product to it. You know, if you were to look at, well, not maybe the Kelowna behind us, but if you were to look at a wall, like a piece of drywall, everybody thinks that a tooth is smooth like that. And that's true because there's a pellicle on top of there. There's a layer of schmutz, and we all have them.
Right, okay.
It's not a dirty word. To get to the crystal structure inside the tooth, you've got to strip the pellicle off, basically. So you need some sort of peroxide type agent to essentially peel that out. And then the color is liberated from in between the crystals. Tooth is not more holy, not more porous, not more prone to cavities or any of that kind of stuff. And when you stop the process, the pellicle will reform, sealing in the new color. Now, the 2 ways that you do that is you can either come into the office and it could be, a short one-time deal.
Right.
It's kind of like, let's go on a crash course diet over the weekend. Can you drop 5 pounds? Probably. Is it sustainable? I'm
Probably
not so sure.
Yeah.
The other way is to have custom fit trays and use product over time. The product over time is kinder and more gentler. And the development of the whitening process is more gradual and more sustainable. Right? Okay. Now, I said 3.
Right.
So the other way is you can literally cover up the teeth. You can use things like veneers and crowns.
Got it. Right.
We all know people on TV that maybe have gone a step or two far.
Too far, yeah. They're pretty white.
And when you're thinking about it, honestly, what makes that jump out at you and what the normal threshold is if the whiteness and brightness of the teeth is relatively close to the whiteness and brightness of the eyes, your brain says it's all good.
Interesting.
If it's dramatically different than your eyes, it's going to rat you out.
Interesting. Yeah. What about because you can get toothpaste and stuff that have but does that actually even work? Or is it such a small amount that you wouldn't really notice the difference?
It's a different thought process. So that staining that they're going after is the stuff that's extrinsic, or it's being deposited, let's say, on top of that pellicle.
Got it.
So my concern with that is now we're talking about abrasives, right?
So you could be causing more damage.
You could be.
Interesting.
Okay, so you got to be a little bit careful with respect to that. And honestly, if you're the person who builds up that stain, again, talk to your dentist, talk to your hygienist. We can see how that gets polished off. We can look at the habits. And, one of the more sinister things that leads to stain, and I know some people will appreciate the information, is mouth breathing. So
I was going to say, I thought you were going to say coffee. I'm like, darn it.
Coffee's definitely in there. Espresso is even worse.
Oh boy, I'm in trouble.
So is red wine.
Oh boy, I'm really in trouble.
Totally.
Well, Dr. Mark, I'm going to say Dr. Mark, thanks for coming in today. I really appreciate it. Talking about internet most asked questions. I think you're more, so you answered a few outside of just dentistry, and you're going to be a Kendrick Lamar. The right answer was Kendrick Lamar, not Drake, just to let you know. So
I will do the research now, and I'll find out.
Your kids will be proud.
Okay. And to be clear, what we're deciding is who's right in the argument.
Correct.
Okay.
Who won this battle? Who won the battle? And it's Kendrick Lamar for sure. I do encourage, though, if people have questions, because we covered 10 today, but there literally could be hundreds of different ones that we can cover. So I say, reach out to us, like email us, send a message. We can talk about it next episode as well. There's so many more things to talk about. And I like these sort of little tidbits because people might be thinking, like I said, it's some of it we talked about today is sort of like day-to-day things, but people might be thinking, well, what should I be doing? What's the easiest way to do it? Because I think, like you said, if you're doing the right things at home, it makes it easier when I come into the chair.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and I think the important part is the stuff that we touched on in the beginning. Make it a relationship. Yeah, right. The more that you share, the more that can be shared with you. Honestly, the objective is to get you the best result for you. Right. Whatever it is you determine that to be. Right. Yeah. So
you also said something to me once that always stuck in my head is that no one's ever died from a toothache or a tooth or something like that. You said something about crooked teeth or something like that. I'm like, that's kind of a funny way to look at it.
Yeah, like most of our issues are not life and death.
Yeah, and I thought that was interesting.
There are some life and death things that are lurking in there, and maybe one day we'll talk about those.
Yeah, we'll get to that because I think that's a good topic to talk about.
I'm always nervous, by the way, when you turn away and you say, one time you told me.
Yeah, that's right. Mark said.
So if you're going to quote me, date me, because I'm always getting smarter, or at least I'm trying to get smarter. Yeah, that's right.
Well, Darbar, thank you. That was good. That was fun.
No, it was a pleasure.
Some good questions answered. And next time you can help people on what to make for dinner and everything. Answer that question as well. So, I'll say feel free to send some questions to us if you have anything. But have a great day, and thank you for joining us today.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.